This is where you're actually doing a lot of your game design, a lot of your adding and removing of components, changing figures, changing numbers, changing values, all happening in the inspector view. And it displays information about something that is selected in the scene view. So if you have it selected in the scene view, the inspector is going to show you some information about it. Okay. So these are the common views. There's also a bunch of additional views. These are the most common ones. The console view, which is displayed at the bottom here. This will show bugs and warnings, and you can also write your own information here via scripts, so you can see if stuff actually happens. There's also the animation view, which is a kind of a timeline animation system, animation view for doing animation and animating values across time. And there's also the profiler. So the profiler is, as I said earlier, it's for when you want to assess what's happening in the game, how much memory is being used, that kind of thing. The profiler doesn't look very interesting at the moment. We'll probably not be doing much with the profiler for this class. Yeah. But as you can see, if you can see the text here, we can actually see what's happening in terms of rendering and your physics systems and how many triangles are being rendered, so you can see, you have a good idea of what's happening in the game at present. Okay, so let's make it nice and simple. And if you're following along, one of the first things that we find very useful for production, and a lot of guys don't use it enough, is the ability to create and save custom layouts in Unity. So you can make Unity display whatever you need it to display, whatever information you need to be displayed, depending on which process you're running. Okay? So for example, if I was doing some profiling, I would be, my Unity would look like this. If I was doing some editing, just normal editing, my Unity would look like this. And this is because you can move all the components around and you can save custom layout. So from, for example, the default layout, the one that we like to use is one where you have the hierarchy next to the inspector, the project below the hierarchy. You want the console view open so that you can have a look at some script debugging. We have the game and scene as tabs in one view. And then we change the project view to a one-column layout. So there's a lot of customizations that you can do so that you can work with what you're comfortable with. And then when you like it, you go to the layout at the top right, the drop down, and you hit Save Layout. Give it some kind of name, like Unity Workshop Layout. Okay. So every time I select that, I'm going to get this view, and then if I've just loaded up Unity and it looks like this, and I don't like it, I can always switch back to the one I just made, so then I can do the rest of the workshop and it will look exactly like this. Okay. Any questions yet? Anyone? No? All good? No? Not good? Okay. Okay. So the other thing is packages. So we want to learn what they are and how to import them. So packages are a way for us to collect a bunch of assets and share them between projects. So let's say, for example, in this class, I've got some assets that I'd like to share with you. Who's following along? Would anyone like to try to do this? Is anyone following along? Would you like a package to import? No? Okay. So the idea is that I can have some functionality, I can have some assets, I can have some textures, some scripts, I'll have some models, and I want to share it with another person in my team. So I can package everything, export that, pass it to you guys, and then you can import it. So the one we've got here is for navigation. Okay. So I want to import a package by right-clicking in the project view, going to custom package. Okay. And I want to import editor navigation. Okay. Just a simple scene that allows us to explore some of the ways that you can navigate your scene in Unity. Again, we've seen a lot of people use Unity, but not everyone seems comfortable navigating. So, this scene is, as you can see, the package brought in a bunch of assets into your project view. And we've got them organized in folders. So we've got some texture, right? We've got a scene, because all projects have to be made of scenes, otherwise you don't have anything to look at. And we've got some materials. So again, materials are an asset type that uses the texture to display a certain way on the object. Okay, so let's have a look at the scene. Okay, that's a very simple scene with some primitives, some materials attached to it. But let's see the different ways that we can move around within the scene. Okay, so the first one, the one that's most useful, especially if you're a gamer, if you've played a lot of FPS games, it's really easy to remember. It's the FPS control, right? The mouse look. So you want to hold down your right mouse button, and you can see there's an eye with 4 keyboard arrow key kind of configuration underneath it, and that tells you that you are in fly-through mode. So if you use W, you can go forward, S will bring you back, A will strafe to the left, and D will strafe to the right. So within no time you can be playing Counter-Strike in Unity, right? Really easy. Okay? And if you move your mouse, it looks up and down. It's the mouse look. Right? So you see this quite a lot. A lot of people navigate in Unity like this. There's also orbiting. So for orbiting, you want to hold down your alternate key and your left drag. So this will orbit around whatever is in the center of the screen. So if you've got that red box in the center, it's going to orbit around that. Okay, so I'm holding down alternate and left mouse drag. You can also pan, which will move the camera in a plane while remaining facing in the same direction. So to do that, you hold down Alt, alternate, and the middle mouse button, and you get a hand icon, so you know that you are in panning mode. And then the last one is holding down alternate and right mouse button, which allows you to zoom. But if you have a mouse wheel, that's probably an easier way to do it. Okay. Okay. Cool. So the other way you can navigate without those shortcuts is by clicking on the scene gizmo. So this allows you to have different ways of viewing the scene. Clicking in the middle or on the text will give you a toggle between isometric and perspective. So with isometric view, objects don't get smaller as they go off into the distance. With perspective, they do. If you click on any of the axes, that will change the viewing angle into some kind of right angle. So if you click on the Y, the top of the Y, you're going to get a top-down view. If you click on the X, you're going to get a view from the right. If you click on Z, you're going to get a view from the front. You can can also get views from the opposite directions of all the ones that we have a look at now. So we're looking at it from the bottom now. Right? And then from the side, from the back, and from the top. And again, you can still change your perspective to isometric. So you can get a very clear idea, for example, of the elevations in your level. So you don't always want to be in perspective view when you are editing. Because sometimes you can't really see the differences in height. You can't really see the differences in distances from the top. So it's good to be able to have a plan view and a elevation view. Okay, excellent. The other way to get around a level, and this is very similar to a lot of RTS games, where you want to be able to look down on your scene. Yeah. You look down on your scene, and you want to be able to move across it, move over it, hover over the top of the scene. So there's no real way to do that with the mouse, right? Because what are you doing? You're panning, that won't do it. So you want to go to your arrow keys, move forward, backward, left and right, and maintain the same height over your scene while maintaining a direction facing downward. Yeah. So this allows you to hover over the scene, and they call this arrow key movement. Okay. For a lot of these things, when you hold down Shift, you're going to move a lot faster. So that works for the mouse look navigation, yeah, and also for the arrow key. You hold down Shift, as you can see, I'm moving a lot faster. Okay. Now this is a really useful one called focusing. It's just a simple shortcut, but this is why it's useful. All you do is select an object, and you hit F, and it makes it the focus of the scene. So if you're orbiting, for example, that will set the object to be the absolute center of the orbit. Okay. This is also useful if you have a huge scene and your camera is somewhere off to the side, you can't see anything, you're trying to find that one sphere that you know is in that scene. So you select it in the hierarchy view, you go over to the scene, you hit F, and you'll find it. So F can be focused, F can also be find. Right? So very useful. Yeah, so this comes from a lot of 3D programs where you have framing selection. So you can do that with not just one object, but even if you had a bunch of other objects selected and you were somewhere else and you hit F, it would frame all of them. So you can have a look at everything that you've got selected in the hierarchy. Okay. So we've seen how we can look around the scene, how we can get around. There's several ways, all designed based on how people want to get around the scene, be able to look at objects. But how can we actually manipulate, change, rotate game objects themselves, and add and remove components, right? Okay, so to do this one, we want to create a new project for manipulating game objects. So, new project. This one is called manipulating game objects. Okay, we want to import the package again for game object manipulation. So this one looks similar to the other one because the materials and the objects are also primitive. But we're going to add some functionality and we're going to learn how to move things around the scene. So there's also a floating yellow cube up there that we're going to do something cool to in a minute. Okay. So, first thing is, how do we move things around the level? Right? What are the different controls for doing this? Moving, rotating, scaling, that kind of thing. So by default, you've got these 4 buttons at the top left of your Unity editor. And there are shortcut keys associated with them. So as you can see, Q will put you in pan mode, W will put you in move, E for rotate, and R for scale. And if you look at them on your keyboard, it's Q, W, E, R, they're all next to each other. So it's a really nice shortcut. Yeah, so your left hand, starting with your pinky on pan, and then move, rotate, and scale. Okay, so let's select an object in the scene. And let's go to move. Yes?
Can we have that package?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to pass around the packages. I suggest you guys grab all of them. There's a little... Yeah. Oh, did you grab it already? Okay. Would anyone else like a copy of the packages? Yes? If you have your laptop with you, at least you can follow along a bit. You can see. At the back, anyone want a copy of the package? Yes. Yeah. Or even if you have another way to store it, you can take it back later, look at it, learn from it yourself. Yeah. Is there anything you want to grab? Yes. So will the participants be able to access the video that we're recording now? Will they be able to see?
I don't know. Anything?
Maybe. Okay. So at least also if you have the packages, then you have a project, you can follow along, maybe you can see the video, you can see, okay, how did he move with the arrows? What was that? What was the shortcut key? So it can be useful. Manipulation controls in Unity. So if you have the packages, what you want to do, I'll reset it. What you want to do is let's quit everything. Okay, you want to make sure you're creating a new project, and then you want to save it as something like game object manipulation. So it's a nice blank project. And then in your project view, you want to import a custom package, and that is how you get the package data. The one you want to import is called game object manipulation. Then just hit import on the frame. Import. And that will bring in all the assets into the project view. And if you open the manipulation scene, you'll be able to see the scene that we're going to use to explore how to manipulate objects in Unity. Okay, so I want to select Big Q. And I'm going to use the shortcut keys to access these controls up here. Q for pan, W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. Now if I hit W, I get this gizmo that appears over the object. The red stands for the x-axis, the red arrow. The green arrow is for the y-axis, and the blue arrow is for the z-axis. And clicking and dragging on any of these arrows allows you to move the box around and keep it locked to that axis. Okay. You can hit Command or Control Z to undo your changes. So this is normal, right? Common shortcut. You can also click on these areas, these squares, which allow you to make movement on a plane. So for example, if you want the object to only stay on the green plane, then you want to click on the X, Z square down here. And it will stick to this plane, it won't go up, it won't go down, it will just stay here and you can move it around on a flat surface. If you use one of the other controls, you're also on a plane, but you are stuck on a vertical plane. Okay. Anyone have any questions about moving? Quite easy, right? Okay. So rotating. E. This is move, this is rotate. Yeah. So for rotating, you are presented with a set of circles, a set of axes. Again, R is to rotate around X, red, X, green is Y, and blue is Z. So in this case, you're rotating around that axis. So if you click and drag on the red, it will turn yellow, so you know it's active, and then you can rotate around that axis. Okay? That's the y-axis, and this is the z-axis. You can also click directly on the object. Not clicking on any of the axes, then you have free rotation, which is a really confusing way to rotate an object. But maybe you want to use it for randomizing some rotation, or when you want to make a quick tweak to the rotation. Some people use it. It's free rotation. Then, sometimes you want to rotate from the point of view of the camera. And that's what this last control is on the outside, the white circle. That allows you to rotate around the view, right, with reference to the viewpoint. So you're looking at the object and you want to rotate it in screen coordinates. Okay. That's rotation. Any questions about rotation? Okay. And then the last control is scale. Shortcut key is R. When you select an object and you go into scale mode, it looks a little bit like move, but instead of arrows, you have cubes. Right? You have squares at the edge. And also a white square in the middle. Now if you click and drag on the white square in the middle, you're going to get what's called uniform scaling. So all the scaling happens on all the three axes at the same time, and the object stays the same shape. If you click on any of the axes and do that, it will increase the scale along that axis. So you can make it larger on the X, larger on the Z, larger on the Y. Okay, and that is scaling. Okay, now we're going to look across at the inspector view on the right. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you're seeing there when you select the object. When you've got a cube selected, the inspector view shows you some information about the game object and also what components are used to make this game object work. Okay? So the name of the game object is visible at the top. It's called Big Cube, which is the same name as in the hierarchy, Big Cube. Then there's a little bit of information about the object. None of this has to do with components yet. And then in the gray areas below is a list of the components that the object is made from. Okay? So as we can see, this goes back to what we were talking about game objects being made from components. So it has a transform. So all game objects will have a transform by default. That gets added when you create a game object. There's a cube mesh filter. So the cube mesh filter has some geometry data in it. Okay, so let's see. Okay, it's referring to a mesh data called cube. And that tells it that the mesh data is made up of 6 sides and it has 12 triangles. But how am I going to render this? So I have a mesh renderer. Okay. So a mesh renderer is a component that allows you to display the cube data, the mesh data. So if you look at the screen here, you can change a couple of things. One of them is the checkbox next to the component. So you can actually turn a component on, and you can see what happens when you have a game object with mesh data, but no mesh renderer. Right. So the game object is there. It exists in the world. It has mesh data, but we're not displaying it. So it looks like nothing. If it's on, you can also change certain things to do with the mesh data, with the way it's being rendered. In this example, we are displaying a shadow whenever the light shines on it. Maybe we don't want it to display a shadow, so we can turn that off. Yeah. And maybe in the case of the ground, we don't want the ground to be able to receive shadows, so we can turn that on. So we can change all these settings for the different game objects, for the different components, and we can get different behavior. Yeah. And it all happens through the component. Okay. So let's do a little bit more on manipulation. Let's go back to snaps. So this is another useful feature that you want to use when you are trying to place things around in the level. Oh, I'm sorry. The reason I was talking about components, the transform component. So we've been changing position, rotation, and scale by using a gizmo, right? Which is fine if you don't need accuracy, if you don't care about the numbers. But you can see exactly where this cube is located by selecting it in the hierarchy, looking in the inspector view, and looking at the transform component. So we know that this cube is located at x negative 0.2641. So it's not exactly in the middle. So we want to change that to 0. Or you want to move it somewhere else. You can type in values and those will show up in the C cube immediately. So if I want it to be exactly back in the middle, I hit 0. And then I can go down to rotation, and as you can see, we were actually rotating it quite a lot, and we didn't actually return it to where it was. So let's change it back to 0 again. And then the scale here is 2, so that's fine because I want that cube to be bigger. But I can also, if I wanted to, I could key in my own values here. So you can type in values if you need accurate size or accurate rotation. Okay? Right. So the other way to be accurate is with snaps. So for example, let's say that you wanted to place objects at every unit, at every one unit. You want to have an object. And you want it to snap to a grid. So if you are trying to move it using this, it's very smooth, right? But maybe you want it to have a bit more, you want it to snap to a fixed value. So you hold down Control or Command, Control, but Command or Command, and you move along the axis. that the motion happens in steps. Okay? So if you needed to, say, place lampposts along a road at regular intervals, first let's learn a new shortcut. Command or Control D to duplicate. So now I've got a copy of the cube. And if I hold down Command and move the cube, I can have it at fixed snap settings, at fixed snap intervals along a road, let's say. Yeah, so very easy, all without any control, just shortcut keys. Okay, did anyone miss that? Shortcut key? Okay, so you want to duplicate an object, it's D, duplicate. So Command D or Control D on Windows. So as you can see in the hierarchy, I've got big cube selected. Watch what happens when I hit Command D. Again, I've got 2. Hit Command D again, I've got 3. So it's a very easy way of duplicating objects. And then to snap, you hold down Command while moving. Okay? You can also snap while in rotation mode. Now I'm snapped to 45 degrees, so it will always be 45 degrees. You can also snap when you are in scale. So now I'm snapping to 10% scale. See, it's not smooth. So where do I set the setting for snap? It's under Edit, all the way at the bottom, Snap Settings. And here you can set how you want to snap on the x-axis for motion, y-axis, z-axis, and also the percentage for scale and the angle for rotation snap. So there's actually a lot of tools in Unity for these kind of things, but they are hidden from the minimalist interface. Yeah, to make it cleaner. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about snap? Anything at all? Okay. So there's another way you can snap, which is by vertex. So how can I make these 4 cubes? I want to make these 4 cubes stacked on top of each other perfectly. Right? So I can try and do it manually. I move it over here and try to arrange it nicely. Yeah, perfect, perfect. And then I can try to do another one. But it's not exact, it's not precise. Yeah? And when you look closely, you can see. So that's not good. Okay, so undo. Now, let's use some other types of snapping. So hold down V for vertex. So first select an object and hold down V for vertex. And you see a white square appear. And that white square will appear on the vertex that is closest to the mouse pointer. And when you click and drag within the mouse, within the white square, you are now going to snap to vertexes. So it becomes very easy to make precision snapping. Okay, I'll do it one more time. This is very useful. Very, very useful for level editing. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people use this. Okay, so what you want to do is select an object, hold down V for vertex, and then click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. Yeah, very easy. So it's really easy to make your levels, you want the layout, you want your walls to fit perfectly. So you bring in your 3D model, and all the vertexes within your 3D model are suddenly good for snapping. You can check to see whether the snap will work. Okay. So you've learned 2 different types of snapping and how to move, rotate, and scale. Okay. So you might also want to change the pivot between the center and the pivot point on an object. This is not very clear in the example we have here, but no, you're not going to see much in this example. But very often when you have artworks brought in from external assets, you'll have a pivot point that is not in the center of the object, right? And you want to be able to use both modes. So for that, you toggle it here. If you want the center of geometry, you choose center, and it places the tool handle, the movement, and the rotation at the center. Or the pivot. The pivot will be included with the geometry data that you've imported. So we'll have a look at that later, because we're going to set up a level and try to walk around it as well afterwards. The other thing is the local or global coordinate system. So what does that mean? So if you look at this object, move it up here, let's rotate it a bit. Okay. Now that's been rotated. Right? Hang on. Let's rotate it a bit. Okay. Now if I'm in global mode, then the axis of the movement is going to be based on the world. So Y is up, X is left, Z is front, right? No problem. But if I want to, how can I move this object in the direction that it's facing? So I change it from global to local. And now I can move this object based on the direction that I've rotated it. So this can also be very useful. Yeah? So if you combine things like this, and vertex snapping, for example, and duplication, you can create very complex but accurate object placement very easily. Okay? So this is true for all of the tools. As you can see, in local mode, the rotation follows the rotation of the object. So I can still rotate it around its local axis. Whereas if it's in global mode, I'm rotating it around the world axis. And the same thing for scaling. You want to be very careful of rotating an object and then trying to scale it in local mode. And that's the reason why the global mode actually gets grayed out. It can still happen when you have a child object. So in the hierarchy view, let's look at something. This is something you don't want to do. Okay? So don't do this. In your game, in your hierarchy view, let's look at this object. Okay? Let's put it there. And let's get rid of the rotation. And then we make a child object. So now this is a child. Yep. So a child object means when I move the parent around, when I move the big cube child will follow. Okay? So like this. Okay? It's linked. And if I rotate it, it will rotate around me. Okay? Now, with scaling, you want to be very careful.
Just like a link for overall.
Yeah. So the child is rotating around the parent. Yeah. Like that. But if I rotate the child, the parent doesn't follow. It's a one-way connection. Yeah. So whatever your parent tells you to do, you do. Right? But as a child, if you want to do your own thing, okay, you can. But if your parent tells you rotate, you rotate. Yeah. Okay. So this is the problem. This is what you don't want to do. If you've rotated the parent, and then you select the child, and then you scale it, right? You want to be very careful that you're not doing that in local mode. So this can cause some broken transform. So that's fine if you do it on the child, but when you do it to the parent, now that transform can be very confusing. So be very careful about doing anything like that. They've corrected some of it we've corrected some of it in Unity 4. It's harder to do it, but you can still end up with a skewed transform, which is usually something you don't want. Okay. Cool. Any questions at all about snaps or anything? Okay. Okay, now we want to see a good example of how a component actually adds functionality. Okay. So what we haven't done yet is hit play. So up here, there are 3 buttons. And when you hit play, wait a while, stuff gets compiled, and the game is actually playing. So this is your game playing in the game view, right? So everything is running, the simulation is running, and nothing's happening, right? Nothing's happening. We're displaying things on the screen, but nothing's moving. So let's look at this yellow cube at the top. He's got transform, he's got something called a collider, which shows him like where he can collide with things, how he will collide with the level. He's got his renderer, which we looked at just now, right? We can turn that off and on. Great. But let's make him fall, right? With just one component. Let's add a physics component called rigid body. So by adding a rigid body component to a game object, you activate the physics system. Okay? So this tells Unity that you want this object to use physics. So now look at what happens when we hit play. One component. Turns it off. Cool. So as you can see in the rigid body, we've got a checkbox next to use gravity. That is what makes it fall. Okay, if you turn that off, and you hit play, nothing. Next. So the other thing we want to look at as well is what happens to values when you are in play mode. Okay, so a lot of people, this is a very common mistake. Something that you do in play mode will not last. It will not stick. It will not stay. It goes away when the game stops. So let's see an example of this. So let's remove the rigid body component. Okay, so let's look at everything here. We've got all those components that we looked at earlier, but there's no rigid body component, right? It's gone. Okay. Now let's hit play. Alright, let's select the yellow cube, the floating cube. Let's add a rigid body component. We can do this all while playing the game. The game is running and you're tweaking it, you're looking at how things work. You're adding a physics component called rigid body. Okay, watch the yellow cube. Hey, right, we added a component. Yeah, it's very cool. We want the game to work like that. So, we hit stop. And then if you look in the inspector, that rigid body component is not there. Because we only did that in play mode. So anytime you do something in play mode, a very common mistake that people make is they stay in play mode, they go back to the scene view, they edit their level, but you've got to look here. If you ever see that blue play button is on, all your changes are going to go away. So I'm going to move everything around. Yeah, I'm going to delete something. Okay. All right. And then they say, oh yeah, I love it, perfect, this is the level. I'm ready to ship my game. And then they press stop. Right? And all the changes go away. So you want to make sure when you're editing that you are not in place. So this is big, 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 very, very important point. But it allows you to edit in place. So it's a good way of trying things out. Yeah. Okay? Okay, so now this is where all the behavior, all the functionality of your game actually comes from. A lot of it comes from here. If you want to add behavior to your game, you want to add a menu, you want to add an enemy, you want to add a spaceship, you want to add all these cool things that you want to do, you need to write a script. Okay? And a script will tell the game object how to behave, what to do, based on certain things. So every frame, do something. Or when you first start, do something. Or when I click a mouse, do something. Right? So when you create a script and attach it to a game object, it appears in the inspector like a component. So, simply put, scripts are components that you make yourself. Okay. So we're going to have a look at one here that we have in the scene. In the project, sorry. So if we look at the big cube and we hit play, nothing happens, right? It just sits there. Maybe we want to make it do something. So let's look at our scripts folder and we'll see that we have two objects in here and it has a little document icon that says C#. So that means it's a script file that's been written in C# language and it has some information inside it about how to behave, about how to update, right, with every phrase. So you can look on the right side, there's a little bit of code. You can't edit it here. If you double click on the C# file, it will open in your editor. So the default editor that comes with Unity is auto-developed. Okay, so you can see there's some code. We won't be doing much of this today, but basically what this does is every update, every frame, every new frame, we want to rotate the transform component around the left axis, the red axis, right, the X, and we want it to rotate 60 degrees, and this simply means we want it to do this every second, not every frame. Okay? Time doesn't matter. Okay, but we're not going to do that today. So let's go to Unity, and let's see how this works. So you've got your cube, and you want to add a component. So you go to Add Component, and then all the scripts that you have written in your project are going to appear in this drop-down menu. Script. Okay? And then we want to add X rotators. Okay, so as you can see, in the component list in the inspector view, there is now an X rotator script. And when you hit play, it rotates. Okay? So it's really easy, one line of code that allows you to do that. So all the behavior that you see in all the Unity games are done through this kind of system. Okay, so you can try adding that one. Another easier way to add things is to just drag them over. Right? So if you have a big cube here, and you want to add the sorry, okay. And you want to add the Y rotator, just drag it over into the inspector view. Okay, and it gets added to the bottom, and when you hit play, and it rotates around the Y axis. So this is a good way to separate the functionality. Yeah? So you can have your designer sitting in Unity doing something. Then you talk to your programmer and say, I need this script, very important script, to make it rotate. Right? Because I need it to rotate, because it's a rotating door in the game, and it's got guns and stuff, and it's all this cool stuff. But first, I need it to rotate. I'm a designer. I don't want to write the code. You're a programmer, you write the code, and then you give me your script. And then I can attach them like functions, right? Like functionality, like extra features, right? So I've got one programmer who did a Y rotator, one programmer who did an X rotator. I drag them both is, I hit play, and now I've got rotation on two different axes. And simple as that, I can add functionality. So this is where the component-based architecture in Unity really shines. And you can really see how you can add a lot of new features easily and in modules. Yeah. Okay. So if you look at the gear drop down in the component view, that allows you to do things like reset values, remove the component, or move them up and down. Because sometimes the order of the component is something that you want to control. So for now, we can show how we can remove these components, or I want to add them again, and I want to copy this one from this queue, and I want to put it on the following queue. Okay. So paste the component. So you can paste and copy the component from object to object, and then now we have more functionality. So it's really easy to move this stuff around the levels and to copy settings from one to another. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Anything at all? The next section is a bit more. Wow. So the next section is a bit longer. We want to talk about prefab, and then we are going to do, thank you. We're going to do some level building and look at some of the things that come up with level building, the terrain system in Unity, importing assets, and we'll do that after lunch. So now we're taking a 1 hour break, and we'll regroup at 2 o'clock. Okay, if you've just joined us, we're looking at prefab, which is a way to use to make reusable game objects. So I've started by making a new project called prefab, and then what you want to do is import the prefab package. Okay. Right. Let's look at the prefab scene. So again, something you may have noticed as we've opened these packages, so a little side note, while we wait for more people to join us as well, is keeping organized in your project. Yeah. So you can place things anywhere you want in the project. You can move them around. You can name them any way you want to. There's many valid names. It's fine. But it gets difficult to read a project, or to find things in a project, or to do things effectively if you don't have some kind of convention or organizational scheme, some way that you're keeping organized. Yeah. So, okay. So, like for example, in the project view here and in the previous project, you'll see that I've made folders for all the different types of assets. So like we have a materials folder, and we keep all the materials in there. Okay. Prefab, we're going to do some stuff in there in a minute. We don't have any prefabs yet. The scenes folder contains all the scenes. So if you have a game with maybe 100 levels, at least all your levels would be in your scenes folder. This is a good way to keep organized. And then textures here are in the textures folder as well. Right? No, very simple. Okay. So we're opening the prefab scene. And you'll see it contains a cube on top of a plane. Nothing special so far. And we've got a directional light so we can see what we're doing. Okay. So what we want to do is turn this cube that we've created in the scene into something that we can reuse and link to other objects. So what we want to do is, in your prefab folder, you want to create a prefab. Okay, and we're going to call it cube. Now the important thing to see here is that the icon next to cube is a white cube. That's not because it's a cube. That's because that is the symbol for a empty prefab. It's a container. It has no game object linked to it at the moment. And we want to bring this cube from the hierarchy into this cube in the project. Okay, so very simply, we drag it from the hierarchy over the prefab cube. Okay, now immediately you'll notice the icon changes. So now it's a blue icon. That's because it's a build prefab. It actually has a game object data linked to it. And then you'll notice something else in the hierarchy. What used to be a black text for cube has become blue. This means the cube in the hierarchy is not an ordinary game object anymore. It is a prefab instance. Okay, so what does this mean? Here's your prefab. You look at it in your project view. You can see all this data in the inspector view. You can even see a preview of what it looks like. This guy is a clone. Okay? He is a copy of this prefab in the scene. Okay. So what happens if I go to the cube prefab in the project view and I change something? So if I change one of these parameters, okay, I change X scale. Okay, changing the X scale in the project view. That means I've changed the prefab's X scale, but what it's doing is applying those changes to the clone that is in the scene. That's because the clone in the scene is still referring back to the prefab in the project. Okay. Let's undo the changes. So why is this something that you would want? So let's say you have a bunch of these guys. So let's clone, let's duplicate the cube, and then we're using our snaps to make a few of them around the level. Okay? So now you've populated the level. In here, you've done 3 copies. Nothing serious. But what if you've made 500 copies of the cube throughout the level? And then there's something you want to change, right? Maybe you want to make it taller. So maybe this is your lamppost in your MMO, and you want it everywhere to be a little bit taller. So it's really annoying to have to go to each one and to change them. So because you've organized it so that they are prefab instances, you can just go to the prefab in the project and change the values in the inspector there. Okay, so let's make them taller. So by changing the master, right, the prefab in the project view, you are able to influence all the prefab instances because they are referring back to the prefab in the project. Okay? Now, if you make changes to the rotation and position, these will not be carried forward. Everything else will. So even changes to the collider, the mesh renderer, if I turned off half shadow, it turns it off on all of them, but not the position and the rotation. Can you guys guess why? Any idea? So it gives you the ability to position the cube around the level, right, in many different places, and to rotate it. So at the very least, you can have position and rotation to be something that is local to that cube, something that is individual to that cube, to that lamppost, or to that asset that you've got in the scene. Otherwise, every time I change the prefab position or rotation, it would just move all the cubes to the same place on the scene, and that wouldn't be very useful. Okay? So position and rotation are the main exception. Okay. So let's say that you've done this, you've got all your 500 cubes, all your lampposts, or whatever it is, all done, and you want one of them to be individual again. So they're already in the scene, they're referring to a prefab, but you would like, say this one, just for this one, you want him to be a little bit wider. Okay. Now what you'll notice is, in the transform component, in the inspector, the value that you change on the prefab instance in the scene has become bold. The other values are still normal. That means that you've overridden a property, which means that the scale on the prefab instance is going to be the scale that we use for this game object, not the one from the prefab. So let's see that happen. Let's go to the prefab cube and let's change the scale there. See? That one is not following anymore, but only for scale on the x-axis. He'll follow everything else. So just for that one property, he's overridden it and he's got an individual value. Okay? So that's an overridden property. Let's say that you've done that and you like it so much that you want all the prefabs in the level, all the prefab instances to look exactly like that. What can you do? You can take this value and you can apply it. You can take this cube and you can apply all its overridden properties back to the prefab by hitting apply. And if you do that, the prefab changes, therefore all the other instances of the prefab change in the view. So let's see that in action. In a single click, two things are happening. I'm applying the value back to the prefab, and then that value gets shared with all the instances. Right? And then you'll notice that the value on X is no longer bold, because that is no longer overridden. That is the actual value on the prefab in the project view. Okay? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Now I've changed everything back. Everything's just following the prefabs like normal. What if I made a change like this? Right? And I don't like it. I don't want it to be like that anymore. I don't want it to be unique. I want it to reconnect with its original values. I want all the values to go back to the values that the prefab has, so I can revert. So revert means all the overridden values will be taken away and replaced with the prefab value. So if I hit revert, it will look just like all its siblings. Okay? So this allows a connection to happen between the prefab as a blueprint for how the object should work, and the prefab instances, which start off exactly like the prefab, but can change the parameters, can override parameters one by one. Okay. Okay, so does everyone understand the connection between prefabs and prefab instances? Do you have any questions at all? Because this is something that confuses some users. Okay. So now let's try something. Let's go back to Unity, and we've got another seed called more prefab. Can you hear me at the back? No? Is it not clear? Can? Okay, no, I don't mind. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So let's delete that seed. And let's make a clone of the prefab seed. So select your prefab seed, Command D will duplicate it. Okay. And then in this seed, we make some more prefabs. And we make changes to the prefab. So what often happens when people are trying to use prefab, they make this mistake. They will edit something in another seed. Okay? They'll apply that so that it works for that seed. But can you guess what will happen when we go back to the first seed? So we save this. We go back to the first seed, and everything's changed. Because you're still affecting something in the project. So when you change something in the project, it changes everywhere in the whole game, right? So anyone who is referring to this cube, if we made changes to the cube, it's going to change every cube in every scene. Okay, so I do that. And then I hit apply here, okay, I made a change, I hit apply, I open another seed, and everything's changed in that seed as well. So this is something to keep in mind. It's a common gotcha, it's a common mistake, and it can be a little bit confusing. So with simple things like cubes and just scale, you'll see it, it's very obvious. But with some values, sometimes people are changing. They're like, hey, why didn't I change this value in scene B, scene C? No, you changed it in the prefab. And because you changed it in the prefab, you changed it everywhere. Okay? Just something to keep in mind. So if an instance is changed in any seed and applied to the prefab, all instances of that prefab will be affected in all seeds where they appear. reusable game objects. Yeah, linked in to prefab in the project. Okay. So now, I really wish more of us had laptops because we want to take you through a little bit of level building. And this part can be really fun. So I hope you guys have a chance to do this yourselves later. Download the installer, or open Unity at home or wherever you use it, and take a look at some of these features. So what we want to do with this is we want to create a level. We want to populate it with some art assets, some of them authored in Unity, some of them imported. And then we want to build a player character such that we can walk around the level. And it can all be done pretty quickly. So let's take it through some of these steps. So first thing we want to do is look at what we can do when it comes to level building in Unity. So there's two basic ways. You can do authoring with the art tools in Unity. There aren't that many, but the big fun one that we're going to have a look at today is terrain. So you can look at that. And we're going to, the more common way is to import assets authored in an external tool, and then you populate the level with them. Okay? So for one, we're going to be using Unity's terrain tool, and for two, we're going to import some stuff that we made in another tool. And we're going to see a little bit how the importing works, and then we're going to place it around the level. Okay. So for those of you that are following along, let's create a new project called Level Building. Then we want to create a folder called Scene. Okay? And we want to save the default scene as level 01. So, File, Save Scene, level 01. And we want to place that in the scene folder. Okay, so it's just a blank scene, nothing special. Right. So now we're going to create a terrain. Then the scene view. Let's create a terrain. Okay. And then in the project view, let's stay organized by naming it My Terrain Data. So when you create a terrain in the hierarchy, it's a terrain that is linked to terrain data asset, to a terrain data asset in your project view, and that gets created automatically. Okay, so we're going to name it My Terrain Data. We're going to make a folder called Terrain Data, and we're going to drag My Terrain Data in there. Okay. Now, by default, when we create a terrain in Unity, it's really huge. It's something like 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers in size, so it's a little bit big for us to play with today. So we're going to cut down the size a little bit so we can play with it more easily. So the first thing you want to do when you create terrain is you want to set up the resolution. And the reason you do this is if you've set up the terrain with some settings, some resolution settings, and then you sculpted it, you painted it, you've done some made some changes, and then you change the settings, you're going to find all your stuff, all your hard work gets erased instantly. Not very fun. So you want to do it in the right order. Okay. So if you guys want to take down these values, you can. These are just guidelines. So I'm making a terrain that's 200 units wide, 200 units long, 200 units high. I'm setting a height map resolution of 129. It's a funny number because it's a power of 2 plus 1, which gives you enough control vertices to have a power of 2 patch for your terrain. So you'll have something like 8 times 8. So there'll be 8 boxes going this way, 8 boxes going this way in the terrain, and then you need to add 1 because you're actually controlling the vertices, not the squares, right? And then you want to set a couple of other things which control how details are set on the terrain, and also how the different terrain textures are blended. And the last value is a stand-in texture that gets rendered when you are far away from the terrain. Okay. So for this one, you want to go to your terrain component on your terrain object and go to the last button of the series of buttons called settings. And then here you can make all sorts of changes to your terrain, but we're only going to make changes to our resolution at the moment. So following the settings I had up on the screen earlier, we're going to change all this to 100, change the height map resolution to 9, change the detail resolution to 128, change the control texture resolution to 128 as well, and the base texture resolution to 512. Okay. And then, so that we can see what we're doing, we're going to create a light so that we can see the bumps in the terrain, so we can see the highs and lows. Okay? The light we want to make is a directional light. So in your hierarchy, create directional light. And then I like to, it doesn't really matter where you put the directional light in the scene, but I like to place it somewhere that I can find it easily. Slightly above the origin of the scene is usually where I put things. So 0, 20, 0 is not bad. And then for the rotation, we want it to be, well, you can use these values, so it doesn't matter as long as the light is shining on the terrain in such a way that you can see the differences in height. Okay, so this is just a reference light. And for the intensity, not too high at this point, so about 0.3 is good. Okay. Right, so let's sculpt it. So one of the cool things you can do with the terrain in Unity is sculpt height. The first control in the terrain component is for raising and lowering the terrain. So what you want to do first is select one of these brushes. You can have a softer brush or a harder brush. You can have some that are designed for spattering the effect, right? So that it's not so consistent, not so straight. There are some very interesting special effect shapes as well that you can use for creating different types of effects. And then you want to choose your brush size. So as you can see, there's a blue area where the brush will take effect on the terrain. So if we set that to a simple circle, you can see it shows the type of brush that we're using. And then for raising and lowering terrain, when you flip, it's going to raise the terrain. And to increase the strength of this effect, you can increase the opacity. So 5 is a really low level. If you increase it to like maybe 50, then you'll see it increase a lot faster when you flip it. Right? It's really easy to get some terrain geometry added. And if you want to remove height, all you do is hit shift, and that brings all the levels down again. So if you want to make mountains, you just click, and if you want to create valleys, you hit shift. So I'm holding down shift and dragging the mouse over the terrain to reduce the height. Okay. Now the second tool when it comes to terrain sculpting is for painting heights. So this is where you set a height and you have the same controls, you have the same brushes, you have the same brush size and opacity, but instead of raising or lowering, you are trying to bring the height at a particular point in the terrain to a value that you define here. So if you make this 20, then what the brush is going to try to do is to bring either the terrain up to 20 if it's low, right, and then it will flatten out at 20, or it will bring it down if it's too high. So for example, if I change this to 10 now, and I click here, it's going to bring up some terrain and down some terrain, so that all the area under the brush influence gets set to the height of 10. So this is really good for making flat playing areas, because you actually want a lot of your gameplay to happen in relatively flat areas most of the time, so this is useful for setting those up. But let's say you don't know the exact number, and you're not sure what that number is, but you want it flat at that number. Let's say I want the top of this mountain to be flattened, and I want it to go out further. How can I do that? I can't get that number. I can't look at it from the side and try and guess. You know, that's a little bit difficult. So, what can I do? What I can do is hit shift, and when I hit shift and I click, take a look at the height value in the inspector, yeah? Take a look at the height value. So I'm sampling the height at a particular point in the terrain. So I want this plateau here to increase. I want that height. So 31.2891. And if I click now, that's what I'll get. Yeah. So that's quite useful for creating those kind of features. Okay. So now I'm finding everything a little bit too bumpy. I want it to be smoothened down a little bit, and I want to be able to create a walkway between these two areas. So one of the ways I can do that is the third tool in the terrain tool, which is for smoothing the height. So this is when you want to change the height differences within the brush's influence. You want to reduce the range of differences, and you want to smooth them from one to the other. So quite an obvious effect. If you see the paint across the terrain, you'll see instant smoothing. And I want to create this ramp here between these two levels. So now you can walk from one to the other. Kind of, yeah. Okay. So again, this is good when you don't want any rough features, or you want to create a basic shape, and then you want to add more features later. So you change your brush, you go to your raise and lower terrain again, you create more features. So by using a combination of these tools, you can actually create some pretty nice effects. You can actually create a lot of the terrain that you would need. And yeah, so they're quite friendly tools for creating terrain. But it's very boring gray terrain, right? So we need to get some textures in there. Okay. So now let's look at painting the terrain. So for this, as well, if you're following along, you want to import the terrain textures package. And then after that, you want to increase the light intensity a little bit, because it will be too dark once we have textures on it. So I'm going to do that now. So in your project view, import custom package. It's sitting in level building, and it's called texture. Sorry, not terrain texture, just texture. And there's 5 textures sitting in there, and we're going to use them for different things, as we will see shortly. Okay. So now you should have a textures folder with some flowers and some grass detail. So these we're going to use later. The ones we want to use now are grass, road, and rock. And we're going to add these to the terrain so that we can paint them on the surface of the terrain. And that is the 4th tool in the terrain component called paint texture. We still use the same brushes, except we're now using them to paint textures onto the terrain. And we want to do this by adding textures. So clicking on the Edit Textures button opens up the drop-down allowing you to add, edit, or remove terrain textures if you want to add one. Adding one opens this dialog. From here you want to select a texture. So this works best with tiling texture. So the first one we want to add is a grass texture. And then we choose the size. So the size is the size in world units for one of the tiles. So this means that each tile of grass will be 15 meters by 15 meters. Okay. So this one will make a 15 meter by 15 meter texture tile. And the second we hit add, everything is a level gets covered in grass. Okay. So 15 meters may be too big. So you can always go in and edit. So go into your textures, terrain textures, edit texture, and then change the size maybe to 5 or 10. And you can see the effect happening on the terrain while you do this. Now it's not much fun if you only have one texture, which is why we've got 3, so that you can actually try to build something. So I'll add the other 2 the same way. And you don't have to have the same tiling size for them, so you can mix your tiling sizes. So you might want a much bigger grass size and maybe more a finer road size. These are all possible ways of working with the terrain texture. Okay, so let's add a road texture. This one I want the tiling size of 5. And then I want to add a rock texture to put on the sides of the hills. Okay, let's do 10. Let's match the grass for this one. So now when you select one of these textures and you paint on the terrain, you will actually be painting a texture. The controls that you have available for that are down here, the settings. So brush size is the same as it was for sculpting. The opacity is how much effect that brush has for every stroke, for every click. So an opacity of 50 will actually do a half mix, a half blend. But it won't accumulate unless target strength is at 1. So target strength is where you want to stop in terms of the painting. So if you have an opacity of 50 and you have a hard brush and you click twice and your target strength is 1, you're going to get a an area that has been painted fully with the terrain, with a selected terrain vector. Okay. If you had an opacity of say 25 and your target strength was say 0.5, then when you paint, it will stop at half. So it blends the two textures together. So playing around with these values as well, you can get a wide range of effects. Okay, so normally an opacity of 1,050 and a target strength of 1 is good for painting roads. So let's make a little path that goes from here somewhere. So some shortcut keys for using the brushes as well here. You can use the less than and greater than to select different brushes, to go through the different brushes. Quite useful. Okay, well, let's just paint a simple row. Okay. That's what we want. Okay, and then you can do the same thing with the rock texture. So this one I want slightly less opacity, size of the hill. It's not a art masterpiece, but you get the idea. You get what you can do with the spray tool in a fairly short amount of time. Yeah. Okay. So another feature in Unity is the ability to add details to the terrain. So what we're going to look at is the grass detail, which is a way of adding vast amounts of foliage to the grass areas, to the grassy areas of your level, really quickly, again with painting. Because otherwise, if you're placing grass by hand, you're placing every piece by hand, it's going to take a very long time. You want the tool for this kind of thing. This is done in a similar way, and this is the second last tool, paint detail. So for this one, we edit details, and we add a grass texture. So for this one, we want to add the grass detail texture. And we want to add, so these healthy colors are for variations in the grass, so that they have slightly differing tints on the grass, so it doesn't look so flat. So I usually use something, the color, something like this for the healthy one, and then, yeah, that's kind of alright. Something like that. And then you can have some variety in the size. But this is a little bit too much. So the minimum width is maybe about 0.5 and the maximum width maybe about 1. So that means that the grass will appear as size somewhere between half a meter and a meter in width, and half a meter and a meter in height. And we can add that. So now what happens when you use your painting tool? You will actually be painting grass onto the spray. Okay. So now maybe this grass is too short, we're not too crazy about it. We can go back into editing the detail and make everything a little bit 说了。A really easy way of adding some really. Cool. So we're going to add one more of these as well to show what you can do. So this one is a funny little cartoon flower. Okay, and for this one I don't want any healthy color. I want it to only be the color that I define. So I set the color to white for both of them. And then if I paint with this, I get tons of flowers. But that's a little bit too much, so bring that down a bit. Bring that down one more. Okay. So the reason I'm showing this is to show you how we can control painting with two different details. So if you want to, if you've created some flowers and some grass mixed together, and you wanted to erase it, if you wanted to erase all grass details, then you hold down Shift, and it erases everything. But if you wanted to be selective about it, then if I only want to erase the grass, I select the grass, and I hold down Control, and then I paint that. So if you hold down Control, then you're selective about which grass details you're erasing. Okay? Cool. So that's great. So we've made all this terrain. We've made it possible for you to have this flowery, grassy field, but we would like you to walk around in it. So, how are we going to do that? Sorry, not yet. No player yet. Next thing we want to do is the second type of art asset that you use in Unity, which is one that you import from an external tool. So we're going to look at the process that Unity goes through when you import, in this example, an FBX. Okay? So the first thing that happens, very simply, all you're going to do is place a model file in your assets folder. And when you do that, and you run Unity, Unity automatically imports this file and stores it. If the model file is made of multiple assets, and they often are, Unity will separate them into multiple assets and link them up. And in the project view, the main imported object is what's referred to as a model prefab. And we'll have a look at that in a minute and see how that differs from the prefabs that we make in Unity. This model prefab will reference one or more meshes. Okay? The other thing to consider is what Unity does with textures when you import something. So Unity will try to find the textures that is used by the mesh automatically. And it does this by looking in a subfolder of where you bring in the mesh. First, it looks for a texture. So let's say we're bringing in a model and it has a texture applied to it. It will look for that texture file in the same folder, in the subfolder, and then it will start looking in the parent folders. So you can place your textures in many different places and Unity will find it, but it's best to place it in the subfolder of your model. So we'll see how that works. It will also create a material. So you need a material to be able to display that texture on the geometry. That will be done based on, by default, the base texture name on the model. Okay. So let's do that. So first thing we do is we create a folder called models. This is where we're going to put all our imported stuff. And then we create a folder called textures inside that. Okay. And then let's bring in some textures. Okay, so if you look in your level building folder in your packages, if you look at models, you'll find there's a stone texture and a target texture. So quite simply, drag those into Unity.
Okay, done. So then sitting in your textures folder, you have two textures, one called stone and one called target. Now what we're going to do is import an FBX model that uses the stone texture. So when we exported it, right, from our external art tool, it was already linked with this texture. It's expecting to find it. Unity is going to look for it, and it's going to find it in the textures folder, and it's going to apply it correctly. And it's going to create a material to do that for us. So you go to your models folder, you click on import new asset. Okay, so models, right click, import new asset. And then we go to our packages, level building, models, and we import platform.fbx. Okay, so that happened really quickly. The platform has been imported. A materials folder was created because one didn't exist. Inside the materials folder, a stone material was created. The stone texture was found and connected to this material. And then the stone material was associated with this thing. So this thing that looks like a prefab but has a little document icon connected to it, this is a model prefab. So this is how Unity represents models that you've imported into Unity. So it's not actually a reference to the file, but it's the way Unity has interpreted the file. So here is the mesh data, as you can see in the preview. This is the mesh that the model prefab is referencing. And then Unity also creates an avatar. This is for the animation system that we may be covering a little bit of later on. Yeah? Okay, so don't worry about that one yet. Now, the thing about model prefabs is you don't want to use them directly in your scene because they are actually referencing a file. The difference between a model prefab and a prefab is that here in the model prefab, if you click on this or if you double click on the model prefab, it will attempt to open that in an external editor. So this is not what we want. We want to use this data to create a prefab within Unity, not a model prefab. So very easy again. Create a new folder called prefabs. Let's create a blank prefab in there called platform. Okay, so now it's ready to be filled. There's just one more step that I want to do now because we're going to use it later, and that is in your model prefab, in your models tab, can we check generate colliders? This will automatically create a collision mesh for this model so that we can use that later when we're playing around with the model. Okay, and hit apply. And then last step is drag the platform model prefab into the platform prefabs. Sorry, into the platform prefab that we've created in the prefabs folder. Okay. So now it's a filled prefab, similar to how we did it when we dragged it from the hierarchy. And now when you click on the prefabs, you'll see it looks just like all the prefabs that we've seen before. It's got all the components, and it's ready to be instantiated into the scene. Okay, so now let's drag this guy into the scene, and we make an instance this way. Okay, so where has that platform gone? So how do I find something in the level and I don't know where it is? Do you guys remember the shortcut key? What do I do? Find. Anyone? Yes? Focus. Yes, F for focus. There it is. Easy peasy. Okay. So now I focused. That means he's also the center of the orbit. So I can move around easily. Now, how do I move something across the level? I can use all these manipulation tools that we had earlier. I want to also make him bigger, so I'm going to edit values in the inspector. And this is the new one. I want him to snap to the terrain. How do I do that? I don't want this prefab to cut through the terrain like that. So I hold down Command, Shift, or Control Shift on Windows, and the object will now snap to the terrain height. So I can place the object more easily. See? Okay. So now I want to place this object on that platform area that we created earlier. Okay, put one there. Want to rotate it a bit. And I want to push it into the level a little bit. And then make a few copies. Okay. I'm going to turn on shadows on the directional light as well, just to make everything look a little bit nicer. And I'm going to increase quality settings so that things look a little bit prettier. Okay. But still, when I hit play, nothing interesting is happening, right? We've made this level. It's got some interesting things in it. It would be nice to walk around and do stuff with the level. But in order to do that, we need to create functionality. And to create functionality, we need scripts. But we're not going to do any programming today. But what I am going to show you is how to assemble the components that you need to create a simple first-person camera that collides with the terrain and collides with anything that has a collider on it. Okay? So very, very easy stuff. We've only been doing this for an hour and we already have terrain, we've got some stuff in it, we've got grass, we've painted it, and in another 15 minutes we'll be walking around it. Okay. So the way to do that is there's just one minor thing I want to change on the textures. So on the stone material that got created, I want to change the main color from gray to white because I want the tint of the material to pick up all the lighting in the scene. So it looks a little bit more realistic. Okay? Okay. So let's create a player that can walk around the scene. So because we're not going to do any programming, we're going to import a package which has all the scripts in it that you need. So import package, custom package, scripts, and resources. Okay? So import everything from there. And you'll see we added a bunch of new folders. There's a materials folder with some white smoke in it, which we may or may not use. There's a physics materials folder. This is for adding a particular kind of behavior to the physics of the objects. So we're going to use that as well. We've also added a texture to the textures folder called smoke particle texture. And this is the big one, is the scripts folder with all sorts of things called controllers. So we're using a naming standard here called controller whenever we write a script whose job it is to basically do everything for one type of object. So we've got a mouse look controller. Okay, we're using the mouse look whenever we want to have some kind of connection between mouse movement and camera movement or rotation. We've got something called a simple FPS controller. We're going to apply that to our player in a minute, which allows you to have a first-person view. So it's a simple first-person shooter controller. And then there's a bunch of other controllers that allow you to do things like fire cannonballs out from the player. So you have something to do in this terrain that you created. Okay, so for this one, first step is you want to create the player. So we're going to build a game object from scratch to show you how we can add functionality with scripts and components to a blank game object. So let's start with an empty game object. So in the hierarchy, let's make him start somewhere down here. Okay? In the hierarchy, we want to create an empty game object, right? But it's not one of the options in the hierarchy. You can't do it here. You have to go to game object, create empty. Right? There's also a shortcut key for that. Command-Shift-N will do it on the Mac. Okay? And we want to call this player. Okay, so now player has nothing. He just has a transform component. He just has a position in space. We want to give him some kind of functionality. So that functionality is the character controller component. So Unity has a single component that gives you a whole lot of control over simple character movements. So for this one, we go add component, physics, character controller. So as you can see, the parameters here control things like the slope limit that the character can climb, the step offsets. So if you want him to be able to go upstairs, it cannot be more than 30 centimeters, which is quite reasonable, and a few other things. And you'll also see that you get a capsule collider telling you where this character controller's limits are, where the collider's limits are. So for this one, we want it to be placed just above the floor, so that when he spawns in the level, he won't fall. Okay? And he's going to start here. Right. So let's hit play. Still nothing. Right? Not yet. Not yet. Okay, we've got a little bit more to do. So we want to add the FPS controller script to this player, and we also want to add a mouse look controller script. Okay, and we'll see what those things do in a minute. So now click on your main camera. Sorry, now click on your player and add under scripts the simple FPS controller. So this is another script that's included in the packages that I shared with you. You can define speed and strafe speed, so forward and backwards, as well as left and right, and the influence of gravity on the character. And another component, scripts, mouse look. So mouse look is what we use to connect rotation of the player to one of the axes of the mouse. And for this one, we want to connect it to mouse X. There's also some parameters here for you to change sensitivity. So this will allow you to create a different kind of feel. Yeah? Okay. And if we hit play, still nothing. Right? Okay, why? Because right now we're looking from the perspective of the camera, the main camera, right, in the scene. And the main camera is over there. Right? doing nothing. So we want to hijack the main camera. We want to take him and we want to attach him to the player so that wherever the player goes, the camera goes. So how do we do that? We make the main camera a child of the player. And then we change the position to 0, 1, 0. So because it's a child of the camera, of the player, its position is relative to the player. So that means that it is now at the same X and the same Z as the player, but it's 1 Y unit above the player. Okay, let's go back to the player again. Okay, focus, and there you can see the setup. So imagine the capsule is your character moving around the level, and the camera is the other eyes at the top. And they're roughly at the right spot, so that's good enough to begin with. So let's change the main camera's name to player camera. And we have completed the hijack of the main camera. It's completely ours now. What do we do next? Okay. So now we need to make the main camera a child of player. We've done that. We need to add a mouse look controller to the camera. Okay, let's see why. Let's not add it yet, and let's see why we need to do that. So let's hit play now. So now everything's been connected, and I'm moving the mouse left and right, but I can't go up and down. I can't move up and down, because we were limiting the player's rotation to one axis, and we're going to give the camera's rotation another axis. Okay, and the reason we don't want to combine them is you can run into some weird locking issues with angles, and it's better to separate them into two different hinges. Okay, so the player camera just needs one control, which is the script called mouse look, and we choose the mouse y-axis for that. So all these scripts that I'm adding, they are all completely editable by you guys. If you take a look at them, you can actually learn a lot about how the game was put together and how the scripts were used and what they do. So I would highly recommend you take a look at that stuff. Okay, so now we're going to hit play. So the player has an FPS controller on it. It has a mouse look, so we can look around. And we can also move forwards, backwards, left and right. So we have a functioning FPS camera. And as you can see, he manages to go up the hill. And because we generated colliders on these guys, they will stop me when I try to walk through them. And we have a full system. Everything functioning. I think this slope limit might be too high. No, just good enough. Okay, great. So now I can walk around. That didn't take long at all. Cool. Any questions? Does anyone have any questions? No? You can always talk to me afterwards, yeah? If you have any specific questions that you want to ask about how I'm doing what I'm doing or why I'm doing what I'm doing, I can try to explain more clearly, yeah? So we can talk afterwards as well. Okay. So I've added a little fun feature for us to for me to show you how you can have some interactivity as well in the level. So I'm going to add some targets. So we need to import another model. Okay, we've already got the texture in there. So let's import the target FBX. So again, a material was created called target. right? And everything got applied correctly, and we've got a model prefab with a bullseye. And then we want to move the target prefab into the, we want to make an actual prefab, not a model prefab. So we create a prefab in the prefabs folder called target. And then we drag the target model prefab over that. So now it's white. So let's fill it. Okay, so now it's become blue. So now we've got a prefab. Okay. So I think I forgot to generate colliders, so I'm going to have to do that again. Generate colliders, and then apply. Okay, now I'm going to drag that over again, and replace the prefab. Okay. So that's okay now. Okay, so now I want to put the target on top of some of these platforms, so that's what it's designed for. So let's drag the target into the hierarchy as a child to the platform. And then let's set the position to 0, 11, 0. And then let's do that a few more times. Okay. And then I also want to increase the speed of my player so I can run around a bit faster. So let's see what this looks like right now. Okay, cool. So finally, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add something to the player so that he can actually fire some stuff. So one of the things in the prefabs resources folder is a resource called Cannonball. And I want to change the material on this. By default it's white. I want to change the material. So you need to go to the Cannonball prefab in the resources folder, in the prefabs folder, select Cannonball and go to the mesh renderer component, and then you can change the material here to stone. Looks a little bit more interesting. Okay, now we want the player, when he holds down the space bar, for a cannonball to fly out. Okay, simple as that. So the way we do that is we add a component to the player camera. So all these components have been written separately, and again, I would go through the code to see how they've been done. Add a component called scripts cannon controller. And then the last one we want to do is we want to make sure that the target prefab has a target controller on it. So we go to the target prefab and we add a component, scripts, target controller. So what target controller does is it detects when a cannonball hits it, it disappears, and it spawns a puff of smoke. Okay? And that's the last piece that we add to this. We hit play. Okay? So when I hit the spacebar, I've got a little bar that fills up at the top, and when I release it, I get a cannonball. Now if I can hit one of those targets, it should disappear in a puff of smoke. Yay! So that's a particle system that was designed specially to do that. So again, this is not a masterpiece of art, but it's to show you how the different component systems can come together, and how you can very easily assemble from some basic pieces some very simple gameplay, but also some very powerful gameplay. What else do we have to do? Skybox. I can do just the final shiny bits. Okay. Okay, does anyone have any questions on how any of this works? All good? Everyone can do? Okay. So we want to talk a little bit about the options that you have for effects and a couple of other things that you can do to add beauty to the level. So we're going to look at adding a skybox. So currently it's blue. It would be nice if there were some clouds. And then we're going to look at adding a lens flare. There's a light up there, but you can't tell. So that would be nice. Okay, so first thing you want to do is, again, we're going to import packages. So we're bringing in everything that way. We go to import package, custom package, and then you want to import lens flares and skyboxes. Okay. So what you can see here is we're using assets that come with the standard assets package. So this comes with Unity. And we've included 2 of the skyboxes here and a small selection of light flares. So what we're going to do first is we're going to apply one of the skyboxes so that you don't have this blue box surrounding everything. Okay, and the way you do that is okay, so let's look at what gets imported first. What did we get? We got a skybox, and then we've got these materials, right? The Dawn Dusk skybox and the Sunny 2 skybox. And they are made up of 6 textures, which are also included, which are the front and back, the left and right, and the up and down textures for a skybox. So then you apply this to your render settings. So you go to Edit, Render Settings, and one of the things you can fill in here is something called the skybox material. So skybox material, you want to select and choose the skybox of your choice. I'm going to go with Sunny 2. And it's really as easy as that. You now have a skybox. Okay, that's better. Cool. Okay. So let's try and match that. Let's try and put a lens flare in there as well. So this directional light that we're using to represent the sun, we want that to have a bit of a lens flare when we stare at it, when we look at it. So you want to select your directional light. The position's a little bit off. We can try and match that later. But we want to select the directional light, and then you want to scroll down to the light component and look for the flare value. So again, very easy. Select one of these. So flares are made from, again, a bunch of sources, a bunch of materials. You can see what the flares look like, what they're created from, and they're based on a set of texture layouts. So again, we're not going to go into the details, but it's made up of several pieces so that you have that flare effect. Okay, so flare. Forget which one looks good. I think the 50mm looks good. So now if we hit play, and we try to look for the sun, and we get some lens flare. Yep. Especially cool if you're behind something and you're trying to fire stuff. Okay. Cool. So really, really easy to add things like flares and skyboxes. Once you've prepared them, once all the assets have been assembled, it's very simple. It's a very simple process. Again, building on the component idea. Right? You're adding components, the components have functionality, they work with assets, the assets are prepared to work with these components, and then your game object increases in complexity without being something that's difficult to handle. Okay. So the last thing, I don't have a slide on this, but the last thing you want to do is build your game. And again, this is very easy. So, to build a game in Unity, you open your build settings, which is File, Build Settings. And you add the scenes that you want to be in the build. And you add the target platform, and you decide which one you want to build for. So this is one of the big reasons, again, this multi-platform ability is very, very easy, especially if the project has been architected well and the assets have been carefully optimized. You can actually get build to different platforms very, very easily, very quickly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build one for Mac OS X. We're going to set up the player settings, so you can icons and whatnot. What we want to do is make sure that we're running in full screen, and we want to run the display dialog. This lets you choose what kind of options you have when you first start it. You can have that enabled while you're in development, and you can turn that off once you ship. It's up to you. Okay. So if we hit build, we just choose a place where we want to place it, where we want the executable to be. So for this one, what I normally do is I create a folder called something like executables. That's a little bit long, but I find it works. And then I name the folders within that based on the platform I'm trying to build for. So like OS X. And then I'll place the build in here. So this one is called level building. And I hit save. The player gets built, everything gets placed in that file, and then we can look for it. There we are. So double click on that, choose your settings, and there we go. Project built. So really easy to build projects in Unity. The basic steps are really, really simple. But what we've found is, especially a focus on good architecture will take you a long way. Does anyone have any questions at all? On anything? Can I answer any questions on anything? Did everyone get all of that? Yes.
How do you match the lens flare?
Yes.
So how do you position it
Yes.
to match the sun in the skybox?
Okay. So the lens flare is attached to the light, right? So I haven't adjusted it yet. So let's look at where the light is in the skybox. It looks like it's almost immediately above us, right? So we need to change the position of the directional light. So for this one, I think it's something like straight down will probably do it. Okay, so now when we look up, That's pretty close. So again, because everything is so iterative, you can actually do little tweaks in the scene view, and then that will be fine once you're in the game view. So we hit play, let's check it out, how we're doing. Yeah, got it. Yep, cool. Okay, anything else? Okay, so that was our session on introductory Unity to show you guys what's possible with the engine. And that is just the surface. So I wanted to make sure that the basic principles were clear. So if you guys got the component-based architecture down, you've got the prefab, you understand how that works, you understand how everything is built with components in Unity, then it's cool. All the rest of it, all the enhancements, the graphical enhancements, the new platforms, all of that comes from these basic principles. So what we're going to do now, to showcase a little bit of, this is a feature introduced with Unity 4, to show how we think about animation and what we're trying to do with animation, and how we're looking to simplify and also make animation a lot more powerful in game. So the system that Joe is going to showcase and talk to you guys about a little bit is called Mechanism. So this is the animation system in Unity, which really takes a lot of the pain out of developing animation, especially for 3D games. But also you're going to see some applications in 2D and also in some in generic styles and some for humanoid styles.
Want to unplug you?
So we're going to need a bit of time to set up. In the meantime, if you guys want to maybe have a toilet break or you want to ask me some questions in private, that's 5 minutes, sure?
Yep.
Yep. And then we'll continue with Mechanism and the discussion of the animation system.
And one of the reasons why, one of the cool things, one of the awesome things about the Mechanism animation system is that what we did was we looked at the way animation systems were being used in different game engines and in different programs, and also how we work with animation systems in 3D programs. And we found out that typically game developers go through a few problems when dealing with animation files, right? And what we tried to do was try to figure out what are the common problems that you face and try and solve these problems. So why I'm excited about the Mechanism system and why we love the Mechanism system is because it solves some really big problems in animation for games. So first of all, one of the big ones is retargeting animation. So when we have a 3D character, you have a bone structure, right? And the bone structure has different names, right? So, and you make an animation with one bone name, and then you use a character with a different bone name, it doesn't work. You get that, right? Because it all gets messed up. So this is a big problem because then the artist has to rename the bone, or in the program retarget it. And if you have multiple artists working, then it's like chaos, right? Or everyone has to follow a particular name. So even if you have, let's say in the studio, you have everyone name your character bone like this. Fine, cool, it works. But if you use mocap, if you buy mocap animation online, right, then you still have to go and rename everything and retarget everything. So even in the Unity Asset Store, we have a huge bunch of animation that you can buy. So we saw that was also a problem. So and you don't want to go back to 3D Studio Max or Maya to retarget every time you have an animation. So that was the first thing we looked at. Okay. Second one was editing mocap sequences. So that's the other part. You buy mocap data, right? And all you want is one small portion, right, of the full animation, right? So typically you have to take that file, and then you have to import into Maya, and then edit it, right? And then export it again. So again, it's another long process. So that's the second part. Then we have animation flow in game. So when you get all these animation files, you have your idle, you have your run, you have your walk, you have your jump, right? And then the artist has to export each one and then tell the programmer, okay, I want to start with idle, and then I want to use walk, and then I want to use run, right? And then so he has to make a list, right? And then he has to tell, like for example, how fast the animation is playing, how fast the character is moving, right? So that was another problem we saw that we always face. Even from 20 years ago until now, right? You have a walk character, put it in game, and then you have to use transform to move, and then your character is like sliding, right? Either moving too fast, the legs are like not catching up, right? For 20 years, this has always been a problem. So then you have to sit there and artists come like, no, make it slightly faster. So you go like, okay, transform 2.5. No, big mode, 2.75. Big mode, 2.78. Right? So then it becomes like this issue. So then we decided, okay, this is a big problem, so what are we going to do about it? And we came up with a solution as well. Then the final part is animation blending. That's the other part, where you've got the artist coming and saying, okay, we want to blend from idle, he needs to blend to walk, and from walk, he needs to blend to run, from run, he needs to blend to jump, he will blend back to run, right? And then when running state, so first of all, in running state, he needs to blend to jump, then jump to running state again, right? And then from running state, if he gets hit, he needs to fall. If he does a different action, he needs to blend this, so suddenly you get this huge confusion that the artist writes down, gives the programmer, and the programmer's like, okay, what do I do with this code? So the thing is, you need to get the artist to do it, right? Because they have to understand how the animation looks like, where things go and how it works. So, looking at all these problems, we said, okay, how do we solve these things? And we had a team that has many years of experience in animation. The guys who made the mechanism system, they're the ones who made Motion Builder, they're the ones who did Character Studio there. So we said, okay, got these guys in and said, what are the cool things that we can do to fix these problems? So I'm going to show you how mechanism works to solve these problems. So let's jump into Unity. Okay. Unity didn't jump in.
Just go down.
Yeah.
It somehow dominates.
Okay. So the first part is we talk about retargeting the bones, right? So now in Unity 4, when you actually import a character, right, you have okay. So you'll see that it has a few different sections, right? We have the model import settings, and then we have, of course, we have the animation settings, right? So this character right now has no animation. This particular model I imported, so I have nothing here. And then we have the rig, excuse me, the rig portion, right? So when you import the model, first thing I do is you set the animation type. So this is like a human character, so we set it to humanoid, right? And then we hit configure, and what this does is it gives you the option to retarget all the bones, right, to all the different parts. Okay, so now if you look here, this character has, the root bone is BIP 001, BIP 001 pelvis, so this is the bones, the name of his bones, right? And then it retargets to hips, spine, chest, right? So we link it up. And this is done automatically, right? You can actually just go in here and you can clear it, and you can even set up another automap here, right? You can go and adjust some more. If you want to go in a bit more, if you have additional ones, additional areas you want to adjust, okay? Now, the rigging system here actually does something intelligent. Because it's humanoid, you know that everything starts from one point, like the pelvis, and then after that will be the spine, after that will be the arm. So the system knows that the moment it comes up here, then it has to be a hand, right? It's not a leg. So that's why it can do it automatically, right? And even if you have the name like R hand or HND, so it looks at the shape, it also looks at the name, and so automatically it does it, right? So you don't have to do much work. We also have a system where, just let me revert that. Oops, yeah. So we also have the system where we can adjust the muscles as well. So if you have a different character with different muscle weights, the size of how much they extend, right? It will move, you can do that as well. So, done with that done. Okay, so this guy is all ready. And what happens is you have an avatar, right? This little file here. You see that actually here? Okay, so it creates the avatar for this particular character. But then I've got my imported animations. So let's take a look at this one. So this is my imported animations. Okay? And on this guy, let's look at his animations for a bit. So he has quite a few animations here, right? There's run, so, okay, so he's got some really funky animations here. So his rig, let's take a look at him. Let me just close this, so it goes away. So as you can see, his animation and his bones are completely different as well, right? Different names, all different names, okay? And we also create an avatar for him. So this is the cool part. So each character we bring in, each animation we bring in, we create an avatar, right? And both these avatars have the same names here, right? So you can create any character you want with different names. You don't even have to name it properly, of course you should, but you can name it, like 0, 1, 2, 3, but it'll still map to each other, right? So mapping problem, retargeting problem, solved. Don't need to go to your 3D program. You can do it in Unity. Yep. So biggest problem here, completely gone. So you can use any mocap data, you can use any character made by different artists, right? You can use it together. Just by this little simple thing, but it's really powerful and awesome. So, second part, the animations, right? So here we have this character, which we have now, he actually has this whole list of animations here. So as you can see, he has this one. If you look at this part here, this is the defining area of this particular animation. So we create like run right. This is run. And this is run left. So let me try and bring up another one. Let me pick a better example here. Okay. Let's pick this one. Okay, so here I have a particular dance, right? This is from motion capture data. And I'm using, so you see the mocap data, right? It starts like this. Actually, is it too dark? Oh. Yep, hang on. Yes, it does. Give me a minute, let me change this. Is that better? I can, but I'm not sure where. Yeah. Okay, can you see that? It's okay, right? Yeah. So when I actually play it, so the character is just standing there because this is the mocap part, right? Because you start with the mocap, the character is ready to, actor is getting ready, right? And then you start recording. So it's recorded the whole sequence, and I don't want that first part, right? I only want the part where he starts like dancing, right? So I set up my clip and I drag the slider here all the way to somewhere here. So yeah, so this is where I want it to start. And so then it will start from this position. So now I don't have to go into another program and try and shorten my animations or bring it up, right? So it will take only this portion of the animation and throw out the rest. So second problem solved, right? Editing mocap data, much easier. The other thing that it helps do is as well is if we look at the run, for example, okay, you'll see that we also have these little bits here, right, where these lights here, where we can actually have loop points that match, okay? So we can actually look at the whole animation and see where the matching points are. So you got the yellow and red. Red means completely not matching, and green means it actually matches, right, with the first frame and last frame. So you can actually make and adjust your loops inside Unity as well. Okay? So cool, that's the other problem solved. So now we have one more problem, which is then you've got a whole bunch of animations that you want to sequence together, right? We have all these different animations and you want to make them sequence together and also blend and transition to each other, right? So what we did was we created a state machine, which typically, if without it, you would actually do in code. In code also, you'd actually make a state machine and you go like if state running, do this, right? So here, that would also mean that the programmer is still handling all the animations as well. So now we want to give the power to the artist. So we create a state machine where the artist then can go in, right, and start adding animations and create animations. Okay? So what I'm going to do is let me create. So this is a animation controller, right? And we can just create a new one. Let me create a new one to just show you. Animator controller, and I'll call this test controller. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is for this character here, right? He has a controller, and I'm going to change it to the test controller. So with the animator component, I'm telling the character which controller to use, right? So right now it's using test controller, which has nothing in it. So if I actually play it, see, he's stuck in the ground, right? Because he has no animations on it, right? So let's go to the animator. Let us bring the idle animation, right? So we can just click on this and drag it into the scene. And so now we have the idle animation. So the idle animation, of course, when it's orange, it means it's the default one. So play it, and he's already idling. Okay? So if we want, excuse me, so if we want to do something like idle and then goes, so now the idle is playing. Let me just show you that again, sorry. Okay. So you can see that the idle is actually looping, and this is actually showing you that it is in this state and is actually looping in this state, right? So it's a very long idle that goes. So we can also then go in here and say, I want to do I have a jump animation. Let's just drag this in, okay? So idle is now playing, and then once the idle finishes, I want him to transition into the jump, right? So I would just right click, make transition, and link that up, okay? And then when I click in the middle of this, it gives me the options of how much I want to transition, right? So we can adjust the transition times here, and we can create conditions for it to go from one animation to another, all right? So we'll take a look at this later, but right now it's exit. So meaning when this one finishes, he will go to jump, right? So let's try that. And this might take a while, so let me increase this idle speed. Is it 0.2 or 2? It's 2, right? Oh, wait. Wrong one. Yes. He's like, okay. Transition. Yeah. See? So he goes into the jump, right? Let me just increase the speed a bit more so it's like a lot faster. So, yeah. Wow, it's a long animation, right? So now he ends there. He ends at the end of the jump. So if I want to go from the jump and back to the idle, right? So I just go make transition and go back to him, right? And then if I click on this one, so again it's exit. So when jump finishes, go back to the idle. So this way, you can see the guy, idle. He jumps, and he's back to idling. Yep. That's interesting. Oh, and then of course, because the idle goes over, right? So now it's in a loop. So he'll just stand there, jump, stand there, jump, and it just keeps going. So see what happens here. Yep. Okay. So that is when we have the so that's how we set up the different animations. That's one way. So let's go back to the other controller that I had before. Let me bring that up. Where's this guy? This Robo. I'll change him back to animator controller. Okay, so here I've got a little more complex one, right? And we have the idle that transitions to the run, right? And it can also transition back, right? And then we also have from the run, transition to the jump. And from jump, we can transition back to run, okay? And then we have a few more, which is the, excuse me, which is the walk backward, right? Then we also have the dance that we did just now, okay? So let's see. Let me just bring this up. Let me just check something quickly. I have. Oh, give me a second. Why is my main camera, this guy, and okay. So, okay, sorry. So let's go back to this one. So what we've done is, when I go from my idle, right? What we want is, we want to push, let's say forward, right? Hit a key, and he starts moving, correct? Okay? So, let me just take this off. Done that. Okay, so what's happening is that, to get it to move, right, there are two things that we're doing. So instead of doing a transform, right, we are now taking the animation and we're using the animation to actually move the character forward, okay? So very quickly take a look at the script that is running here. Let me load that up. While that's loading, let me make some adjustments here. Go back. Wow. What happened there? Okay. So in the script, we'll look at what we're doing in the script here. Very simple. It's a bit difficult to see here. Okay. So we're only taking input, get axis, horizontal, and input, get axis, vertical, right? So we're only taking the input from the player, right? There is no actual transform. As you can see, even in the get key down I've got here, which is get key down, there's jump, there is dance, right? And then there's speed and direction. So there's no transform, right? At this point, I'm not moving the character with code at all. So what's happening is that now, all it does is take input and it actually moves the character based on the animation that was done. Okay? So the old way, and this is what we call root motion animation. So the old way, what happens is, if you play it, so this is your root node, right? If you play an animation, the model moves here, but your root node is still here, correct? So that's why you actually transform, okay? And that's why it's always in place. Now, animated animates, we update the root node. So the root node is always updating, right? So when the animation finishes to the end, it always keeps going, right? So this way, your character will not have the problem of the sliding feet anymore, right? You would actually follow whatever the animator created, and it moves along with that. That's the biggest thing, like I said, past 20 years, one big issue, no more, right? So this is cool because for a few things. One is, excuse me, so the jump, right? Before, same thing, you play a jump animation, right? The animator has to do it in one spot, and then you have to move, transform, right? So then he moves around, boom, he lands, you don't know where he is. But now, with root motion, whatever animation is made, it gets used, right? The other thing is, with that, because you've got this, you're taking it straight from the animation, right? You also have automatic direction. So before, you take the model, you transform, like Z, right? And then after that, you rotate the character 45 degrees, right? And then where is the character now facing? You don't know, right? So you actually have to keep track of the heading. So you constantly in code actually keeping track of where the character is pointing, where the character is turning, right? So now you're actually taking it from the actual model itself. So the moment it comes in, right? That's why there is no transform saying move forward, move back, right? It's just following the animation. You're taking it from the animation, from the model, and it goes forward, means this way, right? As character rotates, you already know the direction it's facing, purely from the animation. So this is really powerful, especially for character animation, and you want to follow this the animation. Code doesn't have to worry about it. So how do we make this thing work? Very simple. So in the state machine here, right, you'll see that from idle to run, I have this transition, right? And what I do is I create a parameter here called speed. Okay? So in the condition over here, I use the parameter that say if speed is greater than 0.1, then you start the run animation. Right? If speed is on this one, if speed is less than 1, you go back to idle. Right? And so the speed is coming from, we're getting it from the input velocity here, right? So we're getting it from the vertical axis, right? So we're getting the actual speed from the input, that's it. So what you get is the guy moving forward, right? And the guy moving backward. So if you see here, he's in idle. Of course I can't now press this, but let me press that, and now he goes to run. Yep. Let me try let me put it this way. Whoops. Wrong one, didn't want that. Let me window game. Scene. Animator. Okay, here we go. So then he moves to run, right? When the speed is more than 0.1, he automatically transitions to run, right? I take my finger off, speed is 0, he goes back to idle. So now the programmer doesn't even have to worry about this. Animator takes everything, puts it there, sets it up, tests it out. You just give him a bit of code for him to test it out, right? And so same thing with here. We've got parameters for direction, parameters for jump, parameters for dance, right? So in my code for jump, so I'm running, and then here I go, if jump equals true, then play the jump animation, right? And here, once the jump is finished, I just go back to run, right? So in the code, all I got to do is I get key down, right? Just check if jump is true. If I press space key, then set jump true, right? So the state machine is listening. The state machine is sitting there waiting, right? It says like, it's sitting there going, is jump true? Is jump true? No, not true, so I don't transition, right? The moment in code says, okay, jump is true, then state machine goes, jump is true, okay, transition, right? And that way we get this guy. Let me go back to here. So this way when I'm running, I hit space, boom, and transition back to run. Like that. Yep. Very simple. No, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall. So very simple, very easy, very quick to set up. So here we got the guy idling as well, and same thing with the other one I've got is, so if he's idling and I press the space key, then play the dance, so dance equals true, right? So again, here, the programmer doesn't need to know the animation file name, he doesn't need to know how long the animation is, which direction, what it's doing, right? The animator comes in here, creates these parameters, and this is what the programmer needs to know, that's it. Dance, jump, right? And whether it's a float, whether it's a bool, right? Whether it's a trigger, that kind of thing. So then he goes, okay, animator creates this. If dance equals true, then play dance, right? So here we go. And he's dancing. And you see the camera is following, and wherever he stops, right, is where the new thing starts, right? So you don't have to worry about where the model ends up, because root motion is always following it. So from here, I can go here, I can dance, and you'll see that the dance actually turns him around somewhere else, right? And then I can continue, okay? So this is one of the coolest things that has happened to animation in games so far. It saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of problems, it fixes a lot of things. So of course when you're doing simple animation, sometimes it's a bit difficult to set up, but long term, when you're creating larger projects, it actually helps so much to actually make the production time a lot faster and a lot easier. So I'll stop there for today, but if you actually go in and check out that we also have different levels and different layers. So I've got my base layer here, right? And you can actually have subgroups. Where is that? Where'd it go? There we go, right? So we can create blend trees where I have different animations blending with each other. So let me see where this is, and then I've got my, so actually you can't see it here, but you look at, can you see the lighting? Yep. It changes lighting from here to here, right? So what it's doing is I'm taking the parameter, the direction parameter from here, and I'm using the direction to go, if one, then go up, go to this guy. If it's in the center, go to this guy. If it's over here, go to this guy, right? So you can have multiple blend trees. So that's the top layer where you have the main state, within each state, you can have multiple blends as well, right? Which is where I'm having the, which is why I can do the, over here, he runs, and then direction, right? So he's blending. So you can actually see it moving now, right? You can actually see it updating in the tree here. So that's why I'm blending from one to another. Because he's in the run state, right? So what I want is, in run state, I want a few different animations. So then if like, in the walking state, I want a few different animations. So you create the states outside, and then you create blend trees to change the different animations within the state as well, right? So you can have these multiple pieces. The other thing that we also have is layers, which I won't show you now, but you have layers to actually break out the different body parts, the different things. So you can have different states for different areas, different pieces. So you could have like a running, then you have another animation which is still running and waving, right? So you only need the wave animation. So then you use the different layers to mask out the running and just play the layer, the waving bit, right? So there are a lot of these things, and it's quite intensive. It's quite intense, but it's really powerful. And if you want to learn more about it, you go to the Unity website, unity3d.com, on Learn. We have a section in animation, and we just updated the tutorial. So they have a full tutorial covering what I showed you here, but also covering the additional blend trees. We show you how to do masking, right? Creating different layers. It's really, really cool. They're all video tutorials. The video tutorials can also be found on YouTube. So if you look for the Unity channel, YouTube, all our video tutorials are on that. So you can actually view it as well. But yeah, so that's it. Any questions? Did you get it? Yeah? Kind of? If, so with an animal, you would actually use the generic portion, right? But depending on what you want to use. So like for example, if it's a cat or dog, you could still use the humanoid, because the hands part will be the front leg, the back part will be, right? But you might have some problem with the tail or something, right? Of course, with the spider, then sorry, you can't use the humanoid, right? But you then use the generic. And generic right now is not as powerful as the humanoid, but we are working on it in Unity 5 and 5 point something, that making it more powerful to actually support other kinds of characters and rigs. But right now for humanoid, it's like completely powerful. Yeah. The other thing is, the last thing is that this is also usable. The animation system is actually for everything. Mechanim is now the animation system within Unity. Right? So if you want to animate any parameters, you want to animate materials, you want to animate sprites, you want to animate transforms, you want to animate whatever, anything in Unity that you can animate, you animate through the mechanism system. So you'll create animations, and then you add them into the animation system as well.
I'm going to show the 2D intros.
So as an example, so over here, so this is something that, as an example for, artists, right? So in this particular opening title screen, okay, there is absolutely no script, no code at all, right? And this is for like artists to actually prototype, so like just to test out, right? So all of it is animated inside Unity, using Mechanim, using keyframes, and no scripting at all. So this is so artists can sit down and actually do whatever they want, try out something, and then just pass it to the programmer and done, right? The coder then just has to take the scene and go play. Doesn't even have to worry about stuff. And so just to take a look at some of the things, so like for example, where's my stuff in here? Let me create, where's my animator? So see, so I've got animation for the banana enter, I've got animation for this, I've got face enter and then face bob. So face enter is when the face zooms in, right? And then after it finishes, then the face is just sitting there, right? So just create two animations, create state machine, link it up, right? It doesn't even have to have any code because it's just like when you come in, when you finish, right? Right? And then play. So then I position everything on top of it, and then you can just go, okay, test it out. The same thing with all of the other parts, right? Like the water and stuff, I have one animation for it to come in, and one animation that's looping over there. And again, no code at all, right? So state machines are, the animation state machine and mechanism is really, really powerful for everyone to use. It makes it a lot easier to use as well. Cool? Yep. Anything else? No, that's it. Yeah. Cool. You have a question? You have a question.
Yes. Into do you have something like animation controller like API? Can we import it into Unity?
So well, it depends on what you want to be using, but right now the character system actually does support the IK. It actually has built-in IK. So it won't take the IK you're using. Okay? So because you create IK to animate, correct? Okay? But you're using it purely to control the character movement. Right? So when you animate it, it won't take the IK from your program. But what is imported in, like my character, already has IK on it. In Unity. It's Unity's own IK. So like right now, the feet, right? When you actually go and actually set it up and to move something, it will actually move the foot up. So you're walking, right? It will actually move and collide and move the feet up. So there is built-in IK for your characters in Unity. Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you want, right? You want basically like if you're moving and you hit here, it won't go inside the wall, right? Yeah. Because what else? How else would you use IK in?
If animation blend, and you can just my IK to blend.
Okay, you want to use the IK to blend it. Interesting. Give me an example of what you like to do, like example.
I want to run jump. I want to use my own IK to blend due to animation. Not using IK, but my own IK.
Okay. But when you use it in your 3D program, you already are animating it, right? Yes. So you animate it, correct? And then you export it. So you got run, you got jump, right? But you don't need the actual IK, right?
If I want to use my IK, I have to animate, run, jump, and animation to run and jump use my own IK.
But right now you don't need the middle part, right?
Yes, but it will be use the IK, not my IK.
Yes. But I'm wondering why you need IK.
For some character that is not a human, but a robot or something like that.
Okay, so I'll try to explain. So IK is to control, right? But when you have your animation, you already finished controlling. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. But you understand what I mean, right? because the IK is only real-time control, right? But after you finish animating, you are not controlling an IK anymore.
Sometimes when the animation will different.
Yeah,
This animation is auto-generated by Unity, right?
yeah.
So I cannot control this animation. That's why I did that's
So understand. But for me, it's like I think you need to try. Have you tried the typing of animation system yet? Yeah. So try it first because what I understand what you're saying. All animation, when you blend, right, it's half, right? You're ready from run and then you jump, right? So the blending is only half, right? So it's not right.
also
Correct?
can control blending in.
Yes. So here you can control where you want to blend and how much you want to blend. So yeah. Yeah, so that's why the transition, you can actually control, you can actually adjust. Let me bring that up. So, we just go back to this project. So it's not the same as like all blending, right? All blending is only like half, right? So now, when you actually transition, where's my preview? Where's this guy? Base layer. Okay, so here, right? You're actually controlling the whole entire where you want to blend. Okay, so you can actually control which part gets blended, which areas get blended, right? The reason why we do this is because IK is actually expensive. It's difficult. It's processor, right? So until you need it, then you have to see where you're. So try this first, see whether that solves the problem, because what you're asking is individual stuff, right? You basically saying, I want to edit the keyframe inside here, but you can't edit keyframes for the IK, not yet. You get it? But you might want to be, but you have to understand that how the IK works and where you want to actually control the transition, especially in games, because you're going to come up with, as an artist, as an animator, yes, you think like, I want pure control. I want to see how it happens, right? But if you actually sit down and think, what are the different situations that it can happen, it's going to be a lot more. So like, for example, I would say, in your game, you say running and jumping, I'm like, okay, cool. What happens if he's running on a staircase? Then the IK changes, right? Because he's running up a slope, then the IK is different. Yep. So then, if you want control, then you would have to actually adjust each frame as well, follow up the staircase, right? But then if Unity takes control of IK, we automatically make this blade go up. So if he's running up staircase, no problem, right? But if you want the control of it, then it's going to be a problem. So then you have to create, running staircase, jumping off a table, all these different maneuvers, especially like when it comes to collisions and stuff. But try out this one first, yep, and adjust. I would say adjust the transition. So you actually go in here, and you can actually like go through the actual animation and go. So here I've got from here transitioning. I can say I want how many % I want for each one, right? You can't see it so much here, but. So I can actually test out and say how much blending I want, if I only want it this much, if I want to change the, where is it there? Like I can move this guy over here, right? So you can actually see even the graph we have here. So then maybe I want have it additional. So then see now he's like slightly slower before he jumps. So there's a lot of control. Okay, so play around with that, and you can actually start seeing some difference. And you might realize like, okay, I just added another section of loop to it, so it's very much different from just normal learning. So I believe that if you try to play with it, you don't need that. Okay? Any other questions?
I have two questions. What is cooling mode? Cooling mode.
Culling mode.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. And
I don't know what is cooling mode. And the second is, I see the transition in statement in solo or loop. What is solo and
solo and
yeah,
oh, mute. Okay, right. Okay. The other one is culling mode, is it?
yeah.
But not in here, right? No.
Animator or animator.
Animator.
Yeah.
Where is that? That is
Animated character will show the cooling mode.
When-
I don't know what is it.
Where do you see that?
In the object that has the animator.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
Yeah, that's it.
Ah, okay. Right. Okay. So the culling mode is, correct me if I'm wrong, Russ, but basically when we have a lot of characters animating, right, it takes up processing, right? So especially if you don't see the character, then you should stop the animation. So it's culling, like camera culling, right? So this is animation culling. Right? So if I have my character basically like behind the wall, right? My enemy is running behind the wall. Don't need to play animation because player can't see it,
Oh,
right? So you can have maybe like 20 characters moving around, but you don't play the animation because it's processor, right? So then you and then the moment it comes nearby or when player can see, then stop the animation. Okay?
it's based on camera.
Yes, so based on renderer, so based on the renderer. Yeah. So that's why you can set it up to do that.
So according to the current way that we're doing it, whenever the renderer is invisible, right? So that means it's outside the thruster or it's been culled by occlusion. If that happens, then what we do is we limit the animation to root motion only. Right? So there's still root motion, but everything else, no. Nothing else animates. So the culling, if you've got the culling mode based on, if you've got it set as always animate, then always animate, right? Doesn't matter where it is. But if it's based on renderers, then when the renderers are invisible, when they're off screen or hidden, then the root motion is animated, but all the other body parts remain static. Yeah. But you want to update the root motion because again, you're trying to do this thing where maybe this thing is moving off screen, so you want to update the root motion, but everything else, why are you wasting time animating it? Right? You get that?
Yeah.
So there's still the transform information is still being updated. Therefore, the root motion is still being updated. But all the, like the fingers are doing this or the hair is flowing, you don't need all of that. Right? Yeah, and then the second it comes back in the screen, boom, update everything immediately. Again.
That way you can actually have really complex animation, right? Because we have a lot of animation data, like full mocap data, so the character is, if your enemy is running with a weapon like this, right? It's heavy, right? So then you have like 20 characters running outside there, you're like, machine is going to start slowing down, right? But especially when you can't see. What's the point, right? So, but you want the movement to still continue, not the animation, right? Yes. So solo and mute, right, is when you're playing back. I don't have a good example here, okay, but when you're playing back your animations, okay, there are transitions. So solo, basically, it'll only show that particular animation, this particular transition. Mute is to That's the word. To silence it.
Disable.
To disable it. Yeah. So basically when you have a lot of transitions, right, then you can actually go, mute will turn that one off. So it borrows from audio, right? So audio you got like maybe 4 channels, right? So if you mute this one means quiet, this one mute, quiet, right? If solo, then it will only this one, everything else quiet. Right? So it's a way to see the different transitions to test. So you can go it's solo or it's mute. Yeah.
Actually shows up in the state machine.
Yeah.
Green for solo.
And mute turns out red.
Red.
So if I go to mute, it turns out red. So you can actually see what the transition is like. Basically, they just test out the different. Right? The solo now will just take over, and everything else will be like quiet kind of thing. So when you have a lot of, you want to see like, oh, which transition is playing, then you just go solo and mute to see which one. It's just like audio, right? You want to hear the different things, so you go like, can't hear this one, so I mute all the rest. Now, everybody good? So, like I said, there are a lot more tutorials. There's more stuff coming up that we're talking about and we're showing in our Unity YouTube channel. So just go to the Unity channel to see a whole bunch of tutorials for this as well, and to help you along to get to where you want to with this one. All right, cool. So thank you for coming and thank you for listening. All right. We're done, yeah? Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, guys. And yeah, I mean, if you want to hang out afterwards, we'll be here for a bit of time. Shut it down. Come
Yep.
forward, ask questions. Okay, cool.
Oh, and Unity, so now it's Unity 4.5, and Unity 4.6 will be coming out soon. And 4.6 has our new GUI system, right? The new GUI. So keep an eye out for it. If you go to our YouTube channel, you will see a video about our new GUI system, and so you can get an idea of how it works. It's really awesome. Yeah, so check it out as well. Right?